I think the most difficult thing about literature review was you kind of do it right at the very start, and then when you kind of get to the end, your mindset and your perspective on the question has changed as you've kind of done your analysis and your data. So then you kind of go back to your literature review and thinking, okay, I've tweaked the question a bit, does it actually still reflect the question that I'm actually trying to answer, and has there been any new literature since I did this literature review and things like that. But also just like the volume, the amount of literature that you get, so you kind of got to be very specific and think, okay, how does this relate to my research, and what am I trying to contribute to the literature as well.
The most difficult part of the literature review for me was the fact that I'd never done one before, so initially I wasn't really sure at all how to go about it. So what I did was I made an appointment with Skills at Library, and they gave me information about how you structure a literature review and also how to do effective searching to find your literature. And when it came to writing up the literature review, I looked at journal articles to see how they had done a literature review in them, and this gave me an idea of the writing style and also the structure of a literature review.
So probably the thing I found most difficult about the literature review was becoming overwhelmed with the amount of information. And so I think my tip with the literature review would be to try and write every time you read something, even if it's just a really basic sounding paragraph that sums it up and is not scientific at all. Just kind of get it out of your head and onto a bit of paper. And then when you do it might even help to get it on a mind map. So I found after a while mind mapping every single paper I read in sort of like just a box on a mind map, and then you can start then arranging things into how you might want to write about them in your dissertation.
I think one of the worrying things about doing a literature review, or one of the things that caused me a lot of stress and anxiety, I guess, was knowing when to stop, and also worrying that you'd missed a key piece of literature. But I think what's key here is communicating with your supervisor, and making sure your supervisor is aware of what you're up to, what you're reading, etc. Because your supervisor is often in a position to kind of guide you if you are missing anything.
So although we didn't have to do a literature review specifically in our dissertation, I was critically evaluating the literature throughout my project. When doing this, I found it really important that when I was reading research articles in literature, that I was making notes on them and making sure that these were critical notes. So usually I would split it into sections and have maybe the aim of the study, the method, the findings, the conclusion, and I would make sure I had an evaluation part at the end, so that I was making sure that I could talk about the advantages and the disadvantages, and I would have enough information available to critically evaluate my research.
The most difficult thing for me was narrowing it down. I found myself sort of going off on tangents and including things that I thought were interesting but actually ultimately weren't strictly relevant to what I was meant to be talking about, and you can find yourself wasting a lot of time going down those kinds of rabbit holes. So I think it's important to just try and be a little bit strict with yourself about how much time you're going to give yourself to reading and then what you're actually going to include in the literature review.